Chord inversions aren't just cool words that you can use to impress people at parties. They're one of the many tools in music that we have of creating tension and release. And when I say you're using them wrong, what's wrong is that you're not using them at all. In mainstream music, 95% of chords are in root position, with the other 5% being divided between first inversion chords and bass players making mistakes. Now, some people think that inversions or fancy chords are too complicated and distract from the vocal. Oh, look, a fancy chord. But when you're doing it right, your choice of inversion will be informed by the lyric and will support it. So how do you choose? Each inversion will have a different feeling, or a vibe, as the kids would say. Now, these feelings will change a little bit based on the chord type and the context, but broadly speaking, this is how I feel them. Root position is the one that we all know. The bass is the root. And for both major and minor chords, they feel at home and resolved. So these feel solid. First inversion is the third in the bass. And for major chords, these tend to want to resolve up. Minor chords kind of want to go down a little bit. So these feel not so solid. So second version is the fifth in the bass, and these oddly feel unsettled but stagnant at the same time. Major chords kind of want to resolve up a little bit, and the minor ones kind of want to resolve down a little bit. But these feelings of wanting to resolve are less strong than with the first inversions, so these feel slightly less solid. Third inversion is the seventh in the bass. And these have the strongest need for resolution. And for both major and minor chords, they will want to resolve down, since the seventh usually resolves down anyway in traditional voice leading. So these definitely do not feel solid. Now let's see how a phrase can sound totally different just by choosing different inversions. So we'll have 3 examples, one with only root position, and then 2 different sets of combinations of inversions. So here is root position only.
At home, open for love all alone. Push comes to shove, I'll keep the doves. Who'll be my love? We'll dance.
So this sounds like a pretty common chord progression for a pop ballad. There's no voice leading or melodic sense to the bass line, it just jumps all over the place, and it kind of feels like every other chord is resolving without really building any tension. But with these lyrics, I want the tension to keep building up until push comes to shove, and then it kind of releases a little bit from there. Also, looping back to the beginning with this chord progression is a little bit awkward. Even though the 2 dominant chord doesn't typically resolve back to a 1, in this case, it does have a bit of a sense of resolution to it. But I want the whole piece to feel slightly unsettled, which is what I've tried to do in version 2.
At home, open for love all alone. Push comes to shove, I'll keep the doves. Who'll be my love? We'll dance.
Starting with the second inversion chord already feels off balance, and that feeling is prolonged for the first 4 bars with this rising semitone bass line, and we reach that peak on push comes to shove with a third inversion chord having the 7th in the bass. As a response to that first rising bass line, the second half is a descending bass line that kind of slowly releases the tension until the end of the phrase. And this seems to fit the lyrics a bit better to me. And in this version, when we loop back to the beginning, there's an interesting conflict between the melody and the chords. Because this first chord is in second inversion, if we only play the chords, it kind of feels like this is actually the last bar of an 8-bar phrase. But when the melody is played at the same time, it's clear that this B chord is actually the first bar of a 7-bar phrase.
Keep the doves. Who'll be my love? We'll dance.
And I love this because there's always a constant feeling of tension and a feeling of constant motion. But in the last version, I've actually ramped up the tension by having no motion.
At home, open for love. to show, I'll keep the doves. Who'll be my love? We'll dance.
So I've kind of cheated a little bit by using a pedal tone, but all of these, except for one, are actually still inversions. So you can see how holding one bass note with having the chords changing above it is actually a great way of building tension. And then when we finally do move, we resolve, but it's not all that satisfying because we resolve to another first inversion chord, and then the rest of the chord progression is still in inversions. And with this last chord of the phrase in first inversion, we keep that tension going and create a strong desire for resolution, which is further emphasized by slowing down ever so slightly.
Keep the doves. Who'll be my love? We'll dance.
Of course, there are a million factors at play when it comes to how music makes us feel, but I consider chord inversions to be among the foundational elements. So if you want to see how we've built upon these foundation with the second and third examples with a full piano arrangement and strings, you can check out the real song here.